Happy Monday, everybody. It's time for another edition of Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin here. And Mike, you wanted me to mention this off of the top. This would be my Michael Jordan flu game because, you know, I'm still getting over my sickness here. So if you're wondering why my voice sounds like this, or I'm not as talkative as I normally am, that is why. But hey, we're still bringing you Ask Mike on this Monday, and we have a lot of questions to get to. So our first question is from Armand Abbey, who asks, how many Arkansas fans have stopped watching the basketball team? I like baseball and the Diamond Hogs. They're highly ranked, but I still watch the basketball game and switched to baseball when it was over.
Yeah, you could do that. If you have ESPN3, you could watch the baseball game on that and really watch the basketball game too. So it was real easy to switch back and forth. And I'm assuming that most people that could do that would do that, but there are definitely some people so frustrated with basketball that they probably didn't watch the game at all. But again, if it's available, I think, and we saw a decent crowd the other night in Walton Arena. I don't think people have stopped going to games just because the season has been disappointing. So I don't think what he's talking about is that unusual that you would watch both. But I also think there are probably some people that didn't do that.
Yeah, I think I saw a couple of different Twitter polls out there on Saturday that said, are you watching the basketball game and then switching over to baseball? And there was actually quite a lot of people that said yes, that they were doing that.
There was also a really interesting discussion where a guy who said he was a basketball fan, I don't know if you saw this.
Oh, well, you're talking about JC Hoops? Is it JC Hoops?
He said he was a basketball fan. No, this was a different one. He got into it too, but this guy said he was a basketball fan, but got annoyed when baseball season started because when he would go over to baseball games, the baseball people would talk down to him and act like he was stupid.
I did see that. I did see that.
And that triggered a discussion of, well, maybe you are stupid. You know, I mean, here's the thing, and I can see where he's coming from, but baseball is a very different sport. And you can be fans of football, basketball, and baseball. I think what happens when you go to Baum Stadium and you start talking like a basketball fan and you're around baseball fans, they will point out things to you like, hey, don't panic because we're down early, or if we're getting beat, that doesn't mean the end of the world, even if we're ranked number 3 in the country, because this sort of stuff happens in baseball. So there are things about baseball, it's slower paced for one thing. There's more conversation in a baseball game. If you go to Baum Stadium and sit there, you're going to have long periods of time where people are talking where that doesn't necessarily happen in a basketball or a football game because stuff is happening.
Yeah.
But there are periods in baseball where, you know, you're kind of sitting there and until somebody gets a base hit, you know, and maybe a guy's throwing, you know, he's fouling off a lot of pitches or whatever, and you just get a lot of conversation going on. And conversation is more a part of baseball than any other sport. So maybe what he's doing is he's coming over there and he's just around people that talk more. If he were a baseball fan and he went to a basketball game, this wouldn't necessarily come up because basketball fans aren't sitting there talking about the basketball game except during a timeout or halftime or something like that.
Yeah, very seldom moments in those games do you get time to talk with the people who are around you. I think the point that he was making is that he feels like baseball fans feel like it's a very intellectual sport, and it is. It absolutely is. But I think basketball is too. I think football is as well. Every sport is different. There's, you know, all these different things that we could argue for days about it, but I think that was where he was getting to. Stuttgart Hog says, our fans who keep complaining that the basketball team has given up must not be watching the games. That or they are stupid. I thought our guys played their butts off against Mississippi State. Mekhi Mitchell is getting better every week. We had that game won, but the refs took it away from us. The SEC office treats us like Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I would agree that this team has not given up. And if you say that, you're probably just mad you're not watching. Because that game in particular, they played hard the whole game. They played better defense in the second half than they did in the first half, which is the opposite of giving up. They now had 2 of their 3 big men on the bench with injuries and still played a good Mississippi State team, not a great team, but a good team, at their place, which was almost full, so the environment was tough. And that game went down. Arkansas had the lead with a little over a minute to go, like 104, 103.
Yeah.
And then what happened was, like, this team just can't catch a break. one of their guys, I can't remember his name, but he'd hit like no threes in the game, and they'd hit only 3 at that point. He goes down, and 9 seconds into the shot clock, just jams up a 3 out of nowhere, and it goes in.
It was beautiful.
It just went in. And it was like, you know, when is this team going to get a break? I thought with about 14, 15, maybe 20 seconds to go, I thought Davenport, I think that's who it was, went up got a rebound of a missed Mekhi Mitchell layup, and it looked like he got hammered by 2 guys, but they called it a block, and that's probably going to happen on the road in a situation like that. There was a free throw imbalance, no question about that, but and Arkansas got beat badly on the boards, which you would expect, but they're right there. Just a little break here, a little break there, and they would have won the game. So I don't think they've quit. And I don't think they'll quit for the remaining games.
No, I don't think so either. And if that is the mentality, then I don't think they would have fought as hard as they did till the final, few seconds of that game if they were giving up and quitting. I think that's a whole other conversation if your team has quit on you, right? Ragnar says some of the radio guys are now saying that there's a possibility that Musselman is gone after the season. Do they have proof of that? Sounds like they're after ratings.
I don't think anybody in the media has said that he's gone. I think some of us have said there's a possibility. So
well, we've even said that on this show.
Yeah, I don't know who he was listening to there, but I think virtually everybody has heard the talk. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. We've talked about it before. I have different sources telling me different things. I had one source that continues to insist he might take a job in the Southern California area or closer to home just to be closer to his mom, but they don't know that for sure. They don't think he's just going to take any job. Personally, looking at the situation right now, I think it wouldn't be a good time to switch jobs if you were him, because you're coming off a bad season. That wouldn't necessarily keep him from getting a good job, but it might make a difference. If he wanted to leave, he might be better off turning this thing back around again next year and leaving when he's a hot property. But again, who knows? Again, I mentioned last week, I had somebody telling me that he's got NIL issues, that the athletic department doesn't have the money to give him the NILs that he needs, and that he's floating his name out there trying to scare some of these boosters into coughing up some money. I don't know if that's true or not. It's just you hear all kinds of stuff. And I don't think anybody's doing it just to get ratings, but I think it would be irresponsible of any of us if we're hearing that stuff, and especially once it hit social media, which it did. Mm-hmm. If there was nothing to it, I think most of us have said that's all baloney, but so many of us were hearing there's a possibility that we have to bring it up.
And to go off of that, I know for when that kind of rumor, hey, Musselman's floating his name around for different jobs, I went and I did my research on it, and what I got was that was true, that he has floated his name around for other jobs. But also what I know from my dad being a coach and being in that business for a very long time is it would be stupid for him not to. His agent would be very bad if he didn't float his name around because he's due for a contract extension.
Right.
So that could be why that speculation is out there, because we do know he has floated his name around for other jobs. That is a fact. Kevin McPherson, we've talked about it before on our Hog Hoops reports. He knows that to be a fact too. So. But I do think that there's more to the story. It's not just he's floating his name around because he wants to leave. He might be trying to, like you said, get more money in a contract extension, or maybe even get some more NIL money. Who knows? Hot Dogger says, I hope Muss sticks around and doesn't get discouraged by some of our so-called fans. Not sure what was going on with Devo either. He made a commitment to go on radio but failed to show up or call to explain why. Not a good look.
He's covered 2 separate issues there. The Devo thing, my guess is that he didn't want to go on the radio, because if he goes on, they're going to ask him, why were you gone? Why did you come back? They're going to ask him to explain that. And that has never been explained. I don't believe he's appeared in any of these post-game pressers, right? Have they had him?
Devo, no.
And I think it's because he doesn't want to answer that question. He clearly wants to keep all that private. So that's probably why he didn't show up for his radio appearance. Now, should he have called them and explained that? Sure. That's what you do if you're a mature adult, out of college, been in the business world a while. You say, yeah, look, guys, I know I have this deal, but let's end it. We're at the end of the season now anyway. Let's go ahead and end this deal. because I don't want to go on the radio and answer questions about that. And I know you've got to ask them. So let's just not do it. So ideally, that's the way it should have been handled. Do I find it shocking or terrible that a college guy didn't do that? No, that stuff happens all the time. And there are things that college athletes do that are much worse than that. So a radio station that had an NIL deal with a guy found out they got stiffed right at the end of it. Well, they're probably not going to pay him. So what difference does it make?
Yeah. I mean,
I'm sure they don't like it, but I don't think it's the end of the world.
Well, he has a contract with them. So if he essentially broke that contract, they don't have to pay him.
Sure.
That's how I would look at it. So, hey, that's up to him. If Debo doesn't want the money and he breaks the contract.
To me, this is sort of what you get when you start making deals with athletes. I don't like that, to be honest with you, when it first started.
Yeah.
I didn't like the idea that the media is paying people to be in the media.
Yeah.
And I realized it wasn't a newscast, but it's a radio station. And to me, you're crossing a little bit of a line there, because we're kind of there to report on the teams. And if you're paying athletes, it kind of boo.
Yeah,
so it's not up to me to decide that. I'm not saying I have a right to tell a radio station not to do that. I just didn't, when that whole thing came up and some of these media outlets started paying athletes to appear, I just thought, man, we're crossing the line here. So in this case, it kind of backfired.
Yeah, a little bit of ethical conversation in that question there. Marty Bird's proxy says, regarding the survey about Bud Walton Arena, I found there to be no option for make needed structural and cosmetic changes only. Many of us would have preferred that and leave the seating mostly intact. All the options presented look to scramble everything. What are your thoughts? Is it a done deal?
It may be. I don't know. I talked to somebody that's a little bit familiar with this. He hadn't actually seen it. I think the only people that got this were season ticket holders. So I haven't looked at it. The guy I talked to hadn't looked at it, but he talked to several people that were season ticket holders that had seen the survey. And while he didn't get into or didn't seem to know what these options were, he did confirm that the people he talked to were somewhat miffed by the fact that they weren't given that option of, hey, I don't think anything should be done other than update what's there. If you need a better air conditioning system, if the heating and air conditioning system needs to be fixed, or if the roof is leaking, or if there's something like that, yeah, go ahead and fix that, but we don't want anything done to the arena. Is it a done deal? I think it's a done deal if Hunter Yurachek gets the money. I don't think he has the money. If you've got NIL issues, I don't think it's smart to go spend $100 million plus on adding some luxury seating to the basketball facility if you don't have the money to do that. So I don't see this happening soon, but I could be wrong about that too, because I'm not in his head. I'm not in his office. I don't know what he talks about when he talks to people about this issue.
Well, when I reported on this, that they were kind of approving plans to move forward with renovations, it looked like the money, while they didn't have it raised, they had all approved that funding.
Proving it and having the money are two different things.
Absolutely. So it kind of seems like there is, like what you said,
I think it's a done deal if he has the money. I think he wants to do this.
Okay. To baseball.
And I'm against it. And I think that what I'm hearing from a whole lot of people is they like that last option that wasn't on there. And I think there's a reason why that option wasn't on there, because he doesn't want that to be an option.
No, they want to renovate it. Sounds like everyone wants to renovate it. And
in the athletic department, not everyone that's a fan.
I understand that. But there's, like you just said, there's a reason that option wasn't there. That's because they're not giving you that option. They are renovating it. They are renovating it. Razorback Road wants to know, what is your overall evaluation of the Diamond Hogs after opening weekend? First two games were fine, but Sunday's lopsided loss was embarrassing. Who the hell is James Madison? That's mean. Oh,
look,
so mean.
We talk about baseball being different, but first of all, let me just say that when that game on Saturday was over 15-5, the first thing that came into my mind is, what happens on Sunday? Because going back several years, Arkansas baseball teams, when they've scored more than into double-digit runs, they come back and score 2 or 3 runs. I mean, how many times has that happened? It's just like you got it all out of your system and now you can't hit anymore. And there was a little bit of that going on, but there were a lot of other things that happened in that game. I think they got a little bit overconfident, got into Sunday. I give James Madison's coach a lot of credit because he knew he had these two good pitchers. One of them's a freshman that had already pitched well against Arkansas, and he knew he could do well as a closer. And he had this long relief guy that got drafted last year that had an ERA of a little over 3. I think teams had batted like in the low 200s against him the year before. Good pitcher. So what he did was he waited to see what happened in the early innings. And Arkansas got a couple of quick runs, but then Mason Molina, who was pitching really well, but he was either striking people out or walking them, so it was a little weird. But they got enough guys on base that they got a base hit and scored 2 runs. So now it's tied in the 4th. That's when he brought this guy on, and he started chewing Arkansas batters up. They could not touch this guy. Then it gets into the 7th, and he starts this small ball stuff. He had a bunt, a walk, and another bunt. Suddenly the bases are loaded, and guess who comes up to the plate? Their center fielder, who'd given him fits the whole weekend, and he jammed a ball up the middle, scored a run. They have the lead, and then it got worse. The throwing error allowed a couple of more to score. They ended up with 4 in the inning, got another in the 9th on a home run, and Arkansas couldn't. I think they scored 1 run in the rest of the game. They just couldn't deal with this guy or the closer guy they brought in. So you got beat by a team that outsmarted you, really. He just waited for the moment. I'm sure he was thinking all weekend, look, one of these 4 games, we're going to be in a position where if I bring these 2 pitchers in, we might beat them. And that's what they did. It was a very rare thing. They hadn't beaten a top 10 team since like before 2000.
Yeah,
Some of
yeah,
it has been like 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
But that's a big deal for a team like that. Now, you get into the Monday game, which started at noon. Once again, Arkansas didn't hit the ball very well. This ended up being a 4-0 baseball game. So give credit to Arkansas's pitchers.
Yeah.
They pitched pretty well all weekend. I'm a little bit concerned about them hitting the baseball. There's been some inconsistencies. I think they left the bases loaded at least 3 times that I know of over the weekend. And now you're going down to Arlington to play some good baseball teams with good pitching and good hitting. And this team didn't necessarily look like a top 2 or 3 team, but maybe I'm overreacting. It is baseball.
But it is baseball, and to give Arkansas some credit here, there was a lot of SEC teams. Look at Florida,
I know.
who lost. Alyssa's laughing at me over there, but look at Florida, who lost their season opener to St. John's.
Save that for the next question, because your buddy's
no.
up next.
Oh no, that's not good.
Email friend that Jamie is where Alyssa was born.
Oh, yeah, well, I was going to get there, Alyssa. She has a problem with Razorback Road, who emailed in the last part of the question, which who the hell is James Madison?
James Madison.
But Alyssa has connection. She's from Virginia. Your family went there?
My parents and my sister went there.
Both her parents and her sister went there. So she knows who JMU
What's the name of
is.
that town it's in?
Harrisonburg.
They have a 2,000-seat baseball stadium with artificial turf.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm sorry, 1,200 seats.
Oh, wow.
And they average about 1,000 a game. So the place is mostly full when they play. They only had a 15-4 record last year, but they still finished midway in the Sun Belt.
15 and 13, right?
15 and 13,
Okay.
a little above 500.
Yeah.
I think they were 6-6 in the league or something. I don't know what they were, but they finished a game or 2 above 500. Finished above Arkansas State in the Sun Belt. But their football team was fabulous. Their basketball team was fabulous. And I think they have a tennis or some other team that was pretty good.
Softball made the women's college.
Yeah,
softball made the women's college
So
World
this
Series,
is a
that's
school
right.
that's had good athletic success, and I will say that watching them in these 4 games, I think their baseball team's going to do better than they did a year ago.
Wow. Okay. Well,
They've got 2 or 3 guys that can really hit the baseball, and I think they've got at least 4 pitchers that I saw that look pretty good.
yeah, we'll check in with them at the end of the season. I know Alyssa's dad would be very happy to hear you say that. Mousetown asks, oh man, I know why you're. Look at this. Mousetown, why are we still taking questions from him? Why did I know this was coming? If you've got a hog on your uniform and you're a top 10, you will blow it. The baseball season is just getting started, and it's already looking like basketball season. Whoa.
Okay, now to your point that you made before. 7 SEC teams lost a game over the weekend. 4 of them were top 10 teams. Number 2, Florida got beat,
Yep.
lost a game. Number 6, Vandy lost a game, and number 9, Tennessee lost a game. Those are all in the East. Number 3, Arkansas lost a game. Mississippi State and Ole Miss in the West also lost games, and Ole Miss lost 2 games. So, yes, baseball is different, and you need to calm down, Mousetown, because you're going to cause yourself to have a heart attack.
Absolutely. I think Mousetown's still being mean because he was mean about the softball team, who I think went 4-1 in the Bear Down Fiesta this past weekend. He was mad about the softball team. Now he's mad about the baseball team. I think
Well,
he
we've
needs to
got
calm
somebody
down.
coming up that's mad at him, so.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm glad.
We've
Somebody
got-
else is on my
Yes, we've
side.
got an Ask Mike person that is mad at Mousetown.
Okay, I'm ready for that question. Let's go to the next one, though. It's from S. Giles, who I know isn't mad at Mousetown, but might be mad at the basketball team here. You've had complaints the last 2 shows about Mike Neighbors and the women's basketball team not getting enough respect. I've heard that Neighbors' job is in jeopardy. Which is it?
You know, I think we're all in here agreement he's probably safe. That's what we're hearing, that they're not going to let him go this year. Arkansas is currently in 7th place. That's midway down, and there'll probably be 7 teams in at least from the SEC in basketball. So if they stay there, they're probably in. They got a 6-6 conference record, 18-9 overall. 4 games left. So I say they'll beat Vandy and Fayetteville.
Okay.
They'll lose to South Carolina and Fayetteville. They'll also likely lose to Ole Miss and Oxford because Ole Miss is an upper division SEC in the standings right now. So the Thursday game coming up at College Station might decide whether they'll stay at 500 in SEC play. And if they win that game and beat Vandy and Fayetteville, they'll win 20 games in the regular season. And I think that gets them in.
I'm worried about the NCAA tournament now with this team. And the only reason I say that is because you look at the bracketology and the predictions, and they're right on that cusp, right? They keep getting last 4 out, last 4 in, right? They're right on that cusp. And the reason being is because when you look at the women's basketball net rankings, and I went through and looked at them the other day, there are teams lower in the SEC than Arkansas that have a higher strength of schedule and better quad
I don't
2
know
wins.
that always applies.
Well, it definitely makes a difference when you talk about the tournament time and NCAA tournament. Those net rankings, that's why the coaches are monitoring them every day, every hour, every minute, because those do matter. And so Arkansas, it's really interesting whether or not they'll be left out this year or not, depending on how the rest of the season goes.
I think they get in.
All right. I'm glad that you feel
Melissa's
confident.
mad.
Dr. Strangeborg says, what preliminary signs, steps, or vibes have you seen/felt happen first before a coach is let go? Are they a similar pattern or different depending upon the sport? To me, it seems that non-revenue sports coaches tend to resign while revenue sports coaches are fired.
You know, if there's a pattern to any of this, I've never figured it out. Let's go all the way back to Lou Holtz. He was fired, and 2 days before he was fired, we were all assured pretty much by Frank Broyles that he wasn't fired. Broyles just changed his mind at the last minute, so that caught us off guard. On the other hand, when Brett Bielema was fired, I knew pretty much about 5 or 6 games left that he was gone, and that turned out to be the case. So I was totally shocked when Mike Anderson was fired. I mean, they went to the NIT, hadn't had a losing season, and Juracek was in his first year as AD. I thought, you know, he'd give him a year just to watch him, an extra year, and he was let go, so that surprised me. But everybody knew that John Pelfrey was gone probably halfway through the season when he got fired. So, and then Chad Morris, there didn't seem to be any question he was gone. I think most of us knew he was fired the day they lost that game to Western Kentucky. He didn't get fired that day, but the next day, and that's what we were told. But on the other hand, Jack Crow, he gets fired 1 game into the 92 season. I still remember getting a call from one of my sources that said, you better go up there to the athletic department today because Jack Crow's going to be fired. And I was like, what? And so I went up there, and sure, that was the case. So there's just no rhyme, no reason to this stuff. Sometimes you see it coming, sometimes you don't. And it doesn't seem to have anything to do with what sport it is.
Yeah, and non-revenue and revenue sports. I think the difference.
I think non-revenue sport coaches get fired a lot.
They do. But it's why you're not. Why Dr. Strangeborg isn't seeing it as much is because sometimes their firings aren't the biggest deal in the news, right? When a football coach is fired or a basketball coach is fired or a baseball, it's in the news a lot. Whereas the non-revenue sports, they do get fired, but they're just not publicized as much or gain enough traction in national media as revenue sports. So I think that's the difference, is that what you're seeing is like what is it called in psychology? Something bias, when you see it and you're like, oh, that's how this is, but it's not really how it is because it's just what you're seeing, your bias of it. So I think it's that. There's a real
There's
name
no pattern,
for it.
and it has nothing to do with the sport. And yes, spring sport or non-revenue sports or Olympic sports, however you want to refer to them, coaches do get fired there, male and female.
Yes, they do. WV Hog fan says, recently you said you had doubts if Arkansas could beat Oklahoma State this coming year. I have a different opinion. Recent history, when we played Big 12 schools in a home-and-home basis, we won the first game away. This happened at Texas Tech, at TCU, and at BYU. It was the return visit to Fayetteville where we struggled.
So basically he's saying there is a curse against Big 12 teams where if you win a home and home, if you have the first game on the road and you win that, you're going to lose the home game. So it's a curse.
Okay.
Okay, so that means that next year they will actually beat Oklahoma State, and then lose to them when they come back, whenever that is. See, I don't believe in that. I'm not superstitious. And here's why I think they're not going to beat Oklahoma State. First of all, Oklahoma State is really good. They returned most of their offense from a really good offensive team a year ago. Secondly, if you're an Oklahoma State fan, what are you mad about right now? What is the thing that makes you most mad? You got left out. Oklahoma and Texas got to go to the SEC like big boys, and you got everyone just say, you stay where you are. So they're mad about that. So what do you think they're going to do when an SEC team comes to town and go, oh, hi, Arkansas, welcome. We want you to be happy while you're here. We've already talked on this show about when Arkansas went over there to play a baseball game.
Oh, yeah.
And what that was like.
Oh, yeah.
It was like,
You were there.
I was there. There was open anger between the two fan bases. They were yelling at each other out there in the stands. So this is going to be a contentious game. There are going to be fans yelling stuff at each other, and Arkansas fans are going to be greatly outnumbered. The thing is going to be full, and it's going to be, I think, one of the toughest games they play all year, and that's why I think they'll lose.
Yeah,
I don't think it has anything to do with a curse.
I think there's definitely something to be said about the fans being ready for that game. I've seen some Oklahoma State fans on social media trash talking a little bit. You're like, where is this?
Well, they're mad, and they have a right to be mad.
Exactly, but we're still months out from the game, and man, you guys are already thinking about it. So yeah, I agree with you there. Hog in Iowa says, I am so sorry to learn of Dean Weber's passing Tuesday night. I've heard former players tell their favorite Weber stories from their interactions. Do you have any? He seemed to be quite the character. And this is crazy because I told you we talked about this last month.
We got a question about is there somebody behind the scenes that most fans don't know about that has an impact on the overall athletic program and specifically the players? Now, maybe the person wanted to see if I would name Dean Weber, but that's immediately who came to mind. And then he died the next day. It was tragically, we knew he was sick. I didn't know how much longer he had, but it was very hard on a lot of us to deal with that. So Dean Weber stories, there's a lot of them, and you kind of have to understand him to see why this would be funny to me. It might not be funny to everybody. Dean was kind of a neat freak. He liked to keep the training room clean. And he was real particular about, don't just throw tape everywhere and leave a mess everywhere. But he really was like that around the athletic department. He didn't like the fact that it was kind of junky at times. One day, this was before the south end zone seating was built, so there were just temporary bleachers out there, what we call erector set bleachers. You've seen them. They got little steel rods and hold up the back, and you can see through them and all that. But we were standing over by the south end zone, probably waiting for football practice to start. I can't remember why we were there. But Dean started talking about how junky it was around there. And he pointed where we were standing, you could just see underneath the west stands of Reynolds Razorback Stadium. You can't do that anymore. It's all filled in there. But he said, look underneath there. What do you see? And gee, I saw a bunch of old hurdles, some old blocking dummies, some old football sleds that they block, both the blocking and tackling dummies and blocking sleds, things just turned over and laying out there. And I said, man, what is that stuff? And he said, that's just what they do around here. They get rid of something, they just throw it over there. And he said, this place looks trashy. And he said, let me tell you what I did, just as an experiment. He said, I had a windstorm came by one night, and it blew this big board off the front of my condo. It was a wooden type siding on the front of that kind. It blew a board off, and it hit the ground, and I got up the next day and saw it laying there. So I took it over and just put it off to the side, and they came a day or two later and replaced the board. But the old one was still there. So he said, I got this idea. He said, I took that board and I brought it over here, and he pointed underneath the stands where the erectors, where the metal supports are. He said, that's the board. And it was just sitting there, underneath there, right at the edge. You could see it sitting there. He said, you know how long that board has been there? I said, I don't know. And he said, 4 years. And he said, it'll be there another 4 years unless I move it, but I'm not going to move it. So I assume it stayed there until they tore all that stuff down when they did the south end zone renovation. I would have loved to have been there when somebody finally went, what's this thing?
What is this, a board?
Threw it off to the side.
That is funny. That is funny. And I think, did you, when you told that story, did he know if it was still there, or did he?
No, it was right there. He showed it to me.
Yeah, but did he know when they redid it if it was still there? Does anybody know?
Oh, when they redid the
Yeah.
renovation, I never thought to go ask him.
Dang.
If they're finally going to get rid of your board, Nate. You want to come
Dang.
down here, Dean, and watch them get rid of it? I didn't think of it.
That would be funny. And then our final question of the show today is Linda Lavender, who wants to know, oh, this is the question you were talking about, Mike. When is Mousetown going to apologize for throwing shade on our softball team? Courtney said he's mean. Courtney is right. I agree with Linda.
Okay, like I said last week, I know Mousetown some, and I did talk to him about this.
Okay.
I didn't talk to him about the softball team specifically, but I did talk to him especially about the complaint he just sent in this, I guess, yesterday about the loss of the baseball team. And here's what he said. He said, do you realize that it's easy to win games when everybody overlooks you? He said, Arkansas's best teams are always when they're not supposed to be any good because they can't handle pressure. He's yelling at me, and I'm like, okay, you know. And he said, I am so tired of Arkansas teams getting in the top 10, getting in the top 5, and then laying an egg because they can't handle the pressure. So our basketball team has done that, and now here goes our football team, or our baseball team. And I said, well, look, Mousetown, okay, but the basketball situation and the baseball situation are a little bit different. It's not uncommon for a number one team in the country can get beat by a mid-major. It happens a lot because you don't win every game in baseball. And sometimes you get a pitcher on the other team that's just good enough that your guys aren't hitting him. And that's why in baseball, for instance, let's talk about football, the Super Bowl. You play one game and the winner wins the Super Bowl, right? Mm-hmm. You don't do that in baseball. You have to play that team enough to where one team wins it 4 times.
Yeah.
That's because baseball is inconsistent.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I tried to explain this to Mousetown, and he just kind of said, I'm going to stay angry until we get an Arkansas team in whatever sport, I don't care what it is, I'm going to stay angry until one of them starts off the season highly ranked and stays there or gets better. And I said, well, all you got to do is watch the track team. They do it every year.
Yeah, look
and he went, I don't watch track.
Well, you need to tell him, and we just did. We gave the examples of top-ranked baseball teams that lost.
Florida is number 2.
Is number 2. Yeah.
I'm sure the rankings have changed today, but Florida was number 2.
I think Arkansas is number 2 now. I think.
Well, they might have dropped but they got beat yesterday, so I don't know if that's in the thing. But Florida was number 2, Arkansas was number 3. They both lost a game over the weekend.
Yeah, I know. So, and you look at the softball teams in SEC softball, I can use the same example. There's a bunch of SEC softball teams that are not undefeated right now. That's because they went on these different, they went to different areas, and, our team went to Florida, went to Arizona, and they've dropped a couple of games, or they've dropped one game. So it happens. In both of those sports, it happens. So what you're telling me really is Mousetown wants an undefeated team that's ranked highly.
Well, he just wants one that if they start off the season ranked number 5, they don't end up not number 5. They should be either number 5 at the end or higher, I guess.
I don't know. Or they have to be undefeated, right?
He also thinks that people like you make excuses when teams get beat. And he says, I'm not here to make excuses. If you put me on the air, I will tell it like it is, but we're not putting him on the air.
Well, I'd love to debate with Mousetown on the air because that sounds like it'd be very fun, but I don't need him yelling at me. I'll just take that.
He was angry. He was yelling at me.
Okay, well, all right. Well, he's very passionate about it. We'll give that to him. We'll see what he comes up with next week on the show. That's going to do it for this week's Ask Mike. We'll see you next Monday to answer your questions.